And hi, everyone. Welcome back to First Principles. Today we've got Johnny Noble with us, and we've been discussing the first principles of filing and more, let's say, also personal knowledge management and organization with his system, Johnny.Decimal. How are you doing, Johnny?
I'm very well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to be here. Absolutely. I'm a little nervous, as you can see, and you're one of my heroes when it comes to personal
Oh no, are you
organization.
for real?
Yeah, yeah. But okay, for
Huh.
the context of this episode, could you introduce yourself to our audiences, please?
Yeah, hi, Johnny. Johnny Noble. I go by Johnny.Decimal on the internet, and it's funny hearing you say that. I'm still not used to the fact that my little idea is popular. It still takes me by surprise, and when people, it's why I do this genuinely. When people say that this strange little idea of mine helped them, it's the reason I do it. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Johnny.Decimal, what is it? I'll give you the 2 minute overview. I guess it sounds really boring, right? And you mentioned there we're going to first principles of filing. It boggles the mind that we're here at the end of 2024 and we're having a serious conversation about filing. It's so strange that this is not yet a solved idea. And
Hmm.
in fact, I think it's getting worse, not better. So Johnny.Decimal is an idea that I came up with about 15 years ago to file things, basically. And it started as a way to file, think of a classic file system. It actually started, I was doing a contemporary dance production of all things, which was way outside of my expertise, and working with a small team of friends remotely, Dropbox at the time. And what I wanted was a way, I've always hated the thing where you have to put in the footer of a document, you have to type out the long file path.
Yeah.
And back in 2010, it was like C colon backslash user tilde one backslash, yeah, and it's this horrible long thing. I thought there's got to be a better way of referencing, of giving an ID to a file.
Yeah.
Here are the ticket prices for the State Theatre in Melbourne. Can't I just refer to that by some sort of identifier? And really, I think my memory tells me that I came up with this idea by accident. And the core of it is that you take all of the stuff in any given project or your life or your job or whatever it is you're organizing, and you first divide it up into 10 things, and we call those areas, broad areas, right? So one of the areas in that original dance production was the venues, and all to do with the venues and seating and ticketing and so on.
Hmm.
And then now you've got at most 10 areas. And then within there, you break those down into at most 10 categories. So within venue, we had seating, prices, because the prices are different at venues and so on. And then within those categories of things, and I say that a category is kind of the place you go to do some work. When you're in a mood to do some work, I'm dealing with ticketing, you should be able to go to the category of ticketing and be in this place where all of the stuff is there available to you.
Right.
And then once you're in there, you now have an ID. And so we give these things numbers. I won't try and explain it because it's boring to try and explain, but you can go to the website and have a look. You end up with a number like 41.14, which was 41 describes the area. It's in the 40s, 41 specifically. And then dot 14 is just an identifier within that category. So we're at 41.14, and that is the ticket prices for the State Theatre in Melbourne. And
Right.
now you can put that in the footer of your document. And all of a sudden, or what I've, because all of this was accidental, literally, I mean, I didn't design this thing. It came from my kind of my brain of numbers, and a lot of it was just lucky, I really think. So it was lucky that I ended up with this thing where, hey, now if you're on the phone to someone and they're somewhere else and you want to try and navigate them to this document rather than going through this ridiculous hierarchy of folders, which can be essentially infinitely deep as
Hmm.
well. If you don't control that, you can just say 41.14. And anyone from the top level of your system can, within 3 clicks, you go to the 40s, you go to 41, you go to 41.14, and you're there. And so, yeah, that's how it came about. That's what it gives you. And yeah, I guess that's the core idea.
Okay. Well, this is great. Now, is this a digitally native system, or this could be done with, a good old paper and analog as well?
No, you can use it for anything. That's another one of its unintended benefits is that you can, in a past job, I used to manage laptops for people. I'm an IT nerd by history. And I had sticky notes. And so instead of having to remember whose laptop it was, or instead of having to write down the long reference identifier from the work ticketing system or whatever, I had my own little system and I would keep the notes. It's funny, I remember all these numbers. That was category 32. It's 10 years ago. And 32.16 would be Jim's laptop, and I could just write 32.16 on a sticky note
Right.
and stick it on the laptop, and that gave me a reference back to my, because the other core concept here is, which came a bit later in the system, is the idea that you should have, I call it the JDEX. It's an index, right?
Hmm.
We don't have these days, we've never really had in the computing world, we've never had an index of our stuff. I think
Hmm.
most people assume that the file system, you open your Finder or your Explorer on Windows and you go and you look at your files. And I think we assume that's it. That's the canonical reference of what I have. And it isn't. And again, this is getting worse, is not the right word, but it's getting more complex as people now have notes apps. People keep things in clouds. You have, of course, your email. You have any number of places that a thing can be.
Yeah.
And so the index is your reference of what you've got. When you generate one of these new IDs, you generate it in your index. You don't generate it in your file system. You don't generate it in your ID. Because otherwise, if you generate it in your file system and then the next one you create in your mail, you could have, now you've got a conflict. So, and you do that just by using any one of the common notes apps. Obsidian's very popular. You can use Apple Notes, although I don't think it's very good. I use an
Hmm.
app called Bear for Apple's platforms because all it is, an index entry is just a note.
Right.
It's just a note in your system. And what that allows you to do is, in the example of managing laptops for people at this old company, I can now, along with 32.16 for Jim's laptop, I can just keep little notes. I can keep a log in there. What was the last thing I did? What's Jim's phone number? When's he expecting it back? All that sort of stuff. So that one number serves to tie so much together
Right.
through the index.
Right. Okay. I also read on your website that you've said that this is also like a play on the Dewey Decimal System with which libraries are organized. Now, I don't know much about that either. So could you give some context on that?
Yeah, so it was the name, credit to my friend Alex, who comes up with most of the things that I do. He comes up with the names. So obviously, Dewey.Decimal is the system by which libraries are organized. And
Hmm.
it's Johnny.Decimal and Dewey.Decimal, it sounds a bit similar, which is why we came up with a name. But really, the core concept there is just, and I like to give this analogy, like imagine going into a library that didn't have an index,
Mhm.
that didn't have a system of managing what books were where.
Yeah.
That isn't a library anymore. That's now just a building full of books. And
Yeah.
imagine if every library in the world used a different system. That would be ridiculous. And somebody would say, hang about, why don't we try and consolidate? And so, again, it's kind of one of these happy accidents that's come around where I think, because one of the things I've been doing recently, one of the things we released just earlier this year was it's called the Quick Start Life Admin Pack.
Hmm.
And so the recognition was that, so because I'm on a journey here as well as I discover what people, it's just me and my partner Lucy, so we're not some big machine. I don't have staff. It's just us at home in our second bedroom. And so as we're discovering what people want and need, what I thought was what a lot of people don't want is we wrote this workbook and recorded a 5-hour workshop. Well, that's a big commitment. And my customers don't necessarily want to read a workbook and view 5 hours of workshop. They come to my website because they want to be organized. That's what they want. And so we produced the Quick Start Life Admin Pack. Lucy and I spent about a month really thinking hard about all of the common things that people do in life.
Hmm.
What do we all have in common? Because I can't organize your hobbies for you. I don't know what you do. But I can organize the fact that you're a human and you live in society and that you live a place and need some way to get around
Hmm.
and that you deal with the money that you earn and owe and save and so on. And that we all deal with technology these days. And then we all have fun and we go places and we go to music events and all that sort of stuff. We go on trips. So we designed this thing called Life Admin with standard IDs that everybody who buys the pack can use.
Hmm.
And now what I'm designing is the same for small business. So that's going to be Quick Start Small Business. And this has got me now thinking that's this small business. I mean, life admin's fine. Who cares if you can't find your theater tickets? That's not the end of the world. But imagine the time we are wasting in small business because everybody who starts a new small business has to invent again
Yeah.
themselves how to file things, where to put my taxes, where to put the company registration, where to file the HR, all these things. And it again, it comes back to this idea of a library without a catalog.
Right.
Currently, every small business in the world just does it again from scratch. And that's wild when you think about it. It's that level of inefficiency I've got a little dial in the back of my brain here somewhere, and that sort of inefficiency just really winds my little dial up, and I can't stand it. So that's the sort of problem that we're looking to solve in a very roundabout answer to the Dewey Decimal question.
No, I mean, I do want to explore some of the history of this, and I know you said you didn't design it as such, but it came to you. But I was wondering what kind of like were you already into really into personal knowledge management, and was this like something you were thinking about, or how did
Not
it
in the
come about?
tiniest bit. Not
Ah,
not at all. Not at all. And in fact, I try and avoid the PKM label these
okay,
days because I think, not no disrespect to it, but I think it's almost a hobby and a lifestyle for a lot of people.
yeah,
People get into PKM and they get into Obsidian and they mess around with plugins and themes and all this sort of stuff.
yeah,
I think there is a vast number of people out there who, like my sister, I compare to, who could not care less about technology, really. She couldn't give a monkeys about technology.
yeah,
Well, she still needs to file her electricity bill somewhere. She still needs a place to file receipts so that when the thing breaks, she can find it again and return it to the shop.
right,
She still needs a place. I just booked a concert ticket an hour ago. And we go in January. Well, come January, I'd like to just know where that is. I'd like
mm,
not to have to think, oh, is it in my email? Did I print it? Whatever. I know where that concert ticket is in 15.33 in my personal system.
right,
And so I kind of avoid the life ad the PKM label, although I know I am part of the PKM world because I don't want a pigeonhole, I don't want it
yeah,
to be, I don't want Johnny.Decimal to feel like a thing that you have to have as a hobby. I'd like you just to be able to use it. And I've still got a ways to go there because, the first thing you see when you come to my website is a whole bunch of numbers. And I realize that's, already there's a whole bunch of people who probably aren't interested, but that's okay. We're working on that. And that's a matter of language and so on. So no, I mean, the idea itself, like I said, it came about and then it was a while until I realized that I even had a thing, when I think back through the 10 years of 2010 through 2020, when I did essentially nothing with this idea
mm,
other than occasionally updating a website. And during those years, friends and I were having discussions of an evening because we've always wanted to be, I'm not going to use the word entrepreneur. I want a lifestyle business.
right,
I want for Lucy and I to be able to earn a nice living and to be able to go on holiday and afford to live somewhere. I don't need to be Mark Zuckerberg, right?
mm,
I don't want a staff. I don't want an office. That doesn't interest me at all. But I want to be independent. I've always wanted to be independent. And so my friends and I were having these discussions all through this time and, getting around and trying to think of ideas. And all that time, Johnny.Decimal was this website that I just had that had I been more into this PKM idea, I might have realized, I might have been 5 years ahead of where I am now, but there you go. I'm not. So no, it's all been very, very accidental. And like I say, it was last year. I can't even remember what the event was. I was working a job that I didn't particularly love and was not giving me any sort of reward either. I can't turn up to work and not do anything useful.
right.
I just need to do something useful for the money. And so I said to Lucy one Sunday evening, hey, what if what if I quit tomorrow? And literally it was like that. We were in bed. I said, what if I quit tomorrow and I go in? And an hour of conversation later, and we decided that I'd do it. And that was the start of the Johnny.Decimal, the enterprise as it is now, where this is actually now my job.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
pays the
I
rent.
yes, I have to say though, I have to confess, I am a bit of a PKM nerd. And that's how I found you. Like
Yep.
really into the deep recesses of I don't know which subreddit. And they said Johnny
Yep.
Decimal and the name stood out. I'm like, okay, this is cool. So I looked and looked. And I've been following GTD for like, I don't know, 15 years now. And
Yep.
and I like GTD. It's just that it did not really have anything for filing. I mean, like the actions and all are
Yeah.
good. I also wanted to be a person who is productive and lazy, or like, or leisurely, how are you going to put it? So this is great
Yep.
because it helps me. But I understand what you're saying because a lot of people don't really care. And,
Yeah.
and okay, let me just ask you this. Areas and what else did you say? What are the main principles?
Areas, categories, and then IDs.
Areas, categories, and IDs. And you also have some like injunctions, right? Don't. So don't have like infinite levels in a folder, right?
That's right. So that's one of the accidental design things was when you think about it, especially anybody who's watching this who's had an office job in the last decade,
Yeah.
office file systems are out of control.
Yeah.
And I'd love to do an actual one day. I'd love to do an actual study, actual science. But you can do some back of an envelope maths, and figure out how much time people waste at work. And I live
Mm.
in Canberra, the capital of Australia, so most of us work for the federal government. So this is your money, right? This is your tax money that we're spending, and it's wildly uh, it's crazy. It's out of control. Nobody can find anything. Nobody can
Mm.
find anything. Microsoft SharePoint's made this a lot worse because all of a sudden now, at least when we had the G drive, right?
Right.
You remember the G drive as a concept when you went to work and everybody just
Yeah.
had a shared drive. At least there was only one,
Yeah.
right? At least there was a G drive. Now we have SharePoints all over the place. You don't even know which SharePoint you got to get to before
Mm.
you get to the file structure,
Yeah.
which, thanks to computers, can be infinitely wide and deep. The computer will not stop you
Yeah.
creating an infinitely wide, infinitely deep file system wherein, of course, you can't find anything, because how would you possibly be able to? And search doesn't work.
Right.
So people think search might work for your Gmail, but when you're at work, just doesn't work at all. And so one of the other happy accidents of Johnny.Decimal is that it constrains you to 10. And so people might be thinking, well, hang on, there's no possible way I could fit my entire company in a 10 by 10 grid of areas and categories. And the level above that is the concept of a Johnny.Decimal system.
Right.
So at home here in my office, when I am John Noble, the individual, I have a Johnny.Decimal system, and it has my life admin with the concert that we're going to in January. And then when I go to work, where also happens to be here, but turn on Johnny.Decimal now. Johnny.Decimal, the company, has a system, and that's shared with me and Lucy, and that contains, our products and marketing and all that sort of stuff. So that's the level above a system, but you can fit an amazing amount of stuff in a system.
Mm.
But yeah, that's one of the benefits of it is that it causes you to have, because think of this as well as points of decision, both when you save a thing and when you go to retrieve a thing. When you go to save or retrieve a thing in a classic file system, you have essentially infinite choice. If you even know where to look, if you're in SharePoint, you might not even be in the right place.
Right.
Whereas with Johnny.Decimal, at the first level, you have at most 10 areas. You're not looking at your categories yet. You're not there. You're at a
Mm.
folder system with, and I say at most. I always say, I never say 10. I say at most. Because if you can use less, use less.
Yeah.
So you might only have 4 choices, and they're carefully designed to be very broad. And so the choice should be obvious. And so you pick one of 4, and now the other 3 have gone away, right? You don't have to think about those other 3. And now you're looking at most 10 categories.
Mm.
And again, try and use fewer. And then again, they should be unambiguous. One of the core mistakes people make when they design their own systems is to have ambiguity. People will design a category called finance and another one called money and another one called budgets.
Right.
So no, they're all the same thing. You must disambiguate for your future self.
Mm.
So there's only one possible, and just call it finance, money, and budgets. People seem scared of long path names. Just call it what it is. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that limitation is another key part of the system. And I think that's a thing that people find relieving. It's like we've gone from this world where you can do anything you want, and that's alluring, but it turns out to be a really bad idea.
Right. 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 And 10, is there like some psychological significance to that number, or is it just arbitrary?
The numbers just came. It's because of the structure of and again, I didn't design this. I don't know where it came from. I've always had a brain for numbers.
Mm.
Like when I was a kid, my first computer was a Sinclair ZX Spectrum, which was a thing we had in the UK in the 1980s.
Mm.
And I used to design in Sinclair Basic databases for to catalog the contents of my room. So like this goes deep. But no, it just comes about from the number system. If you have, because the range of Johnny.Decimal IDs is from 00.00
Yeah.
through 99.99. And like we've said, the first 2 are the categories, which are then grouped into 10 areas. So it just comes as a consequence of the decimal number system. Just
Yeah.
another happy accident.
Yeah. My father used to work in hotels, and especially when it comes to inventory and like kitchen. And I was moving out for the first time, and I asked him, like, how do I know exactly what I want in a kitchen, and how do I make sure that I fill it up at the right time? This tends to help. People give me a lot of, like, I don't know, let's say not good vibes when I say that they need to get a little organized. But I think it's not a bad thing. And also let me just ask you, it's not you're not always super anal about, this is, oh, it needs to go in this particular category and super crazy about that, right? This is to help you live a freer life.
That's right. And I mean the system the system is a set of rules that
Yeah.
are loosely bound. And I mean, if you go on the Discord, especially, if you can look at my Discord, people take this and run. I mean, it tends to be of a theme. It's number based.
Yeah.
It's always number based. If you get rid of the numbers, you're off on your own path there.
Huh.
But people bend it to their own ways. Just recently, a couple of months ago, we put up some new pages on the website about the idea of expanding, because this doesn't fit everything, right?
Mhm.
Here's a classic example of what this doesn't fit is you're a student or a professor. So
Right.
academia,
Mm.
because as one of those things, you can easily imagine having more than 10 of classes, semesters, assignments, right? Any number of these things. And
Yeah.
so there are situations where this doesn't fit, but I find those situations are ones where the world has already presented you a natural structure.
Yeah.
If you're a student, the natural structure is year, semester, class. Don't try and break that.
Yeah.
But then that gets onto this idea, which is and one of the things I've come to realize more recently is that consistency is a really core part of Johnny.Decimal, because a lot of what Johnny.Decimal is, it's behaviors as well. It's not, I can give you this website and I can give you these rules.
Mm.
But there are so many behaviors that once you internalize, you can be just better at everything. Like, I mean, just simple things like file naming and consistency. You see people, again, at work, and you'll see folders with 20 versions of the same document,
Yeah.
returned surveys from users, something. And they'll all be named differently.
Yeah.
First name, surname, dash, date, comma, surname, first, you can imagine space, dash, space, no dash, underscores, just everything different.
Mm.
And if we were just consistent, if we just took a little bit of time, and it does take time, none of this is free from a time perspective. This is not, the system's all free to use, but it takes effort. Of course, it
Right.
takes effort. It takes effort to have a tidy house. If you never tidy your house up, you live in a dump.
Yeah.
And this is the same. It's digital hygiene, and you just have to put some time aside for it. And I mean, in my everything has to be somewhere. Everything you ask, am I meticulous about putting a thing in a place? You have to put a file somewhere.
Right.
It can't just be nowhere. I mean, it can
Mm.
be in your desktop, I guess, but now you just got, that desktop. So you just have to find a place. You just have to find the place for it. And that's another one of the things I've realized more recently is that good enough is close enough is good enough.
Yeah.
And that's what we say with the Life Admin pack. There will not be a perfect place. Life Admin has about 110 usable IDs.
Mm.
So that's meant to cover your entire basic life. And that's not many. And
Yeah.
so, of course, people are going to find exceptions and people are going to bump up against the edge of that. But what we say is find the best fit. There'll be something that's near enough. And so just put it there. Here's where your index, your JDEX, as we call it, comes into play. Make yourself a note on your JDEX, because now you can always search that and you can find this thing again in the future. But there's
Yeah.
got to be a place. Just find somewhere.
I bought that course. I haven't yet gone through it, so I plan to go through it in January.
Good, good.
Yeah, that's already there. But yeah, I wanted to also understand that, do you tolerate something like general or miscellaneous in this system? Because I don't know, I'm a completist, but I'm also like interested in 10 areas, and I don't want to like limit my thoughts if I'm like it's not compliant with the 10 areas that you're giving me. So how does that work?
It's an interesting question. So again, I think assuming that let's constrain ourselves to your it's more tangible. Let's say to my job, right? My
Hmm.
job was Johnny.Decimal. So if I'm doing something to do with Johnny.Decimal, whatever this is, right?
Right.
It must relate to something to do with Johnny.Decimal. Now, there is a recognition that you might not know what I don't want to do is to get in your way. I don't want, and in fact, I used to do this myself, and this is one of the things I'm kind of switching away from as a behavior. I used to have to find an ID and potentially create an ID first before you start work, because
Hmm.
otherwise, where's it going to go? Where am I going to save that document immediately?
Yeah.
And that is a hurdle, and that is a mental hurdle that I don't want to put in your way. So we've got a couple of techniques for that. The first is What I started to do a while ago is to reserve the first 10 IDs in any category. So category 10, so 10.00 through 09, the
Hmm.
first 10 are reserved for the system.
Okay.
And they're always standard. If you look on my website, there's a page called the standard zeros. And so the 01 is always an inbox, GTD style. You
Yeah.
can always just dump something in the inbox. And then, of course, don't forget to tidy up your inboxes and go and sort things out. 2 was, it'd be embarrassing if I can't remember what these were. But recently, what I've moved to is 3 used to be something else. And I think 3 now is work in progress.
Right.
And
Right.
what that is for is I'm just doing stuff, get out of my way, right? Get the heck out of my way and let me save this thing somewhere that isn't my desktop.
Hmm.
And how you do this is if you can find a category, which is a reasonably broad grouping of stuff, if you can find a category where that thing should go, but you don't yet have a good ID, put it in the category inbox or the category work in progress. I tend to think of as an inbox as things you've received that you just need to sort, and a work in progress is work that you're doing that you then need to sort. We also have we have a someday idea, again, a GTD idea. At 08 is for someday. That's for
Hmm.
things that you would like to organize, but just whenever. And then that's where your archives sit, which is at 09. And archives are things you will not organize, but you just don't want to throw them away.
Okay.
So if you can find a category, that's where that thing should go. And think about this. If you can't find a category, if you're at work, and I'm now in my Johnny.Decimal system here at work, and I've got, I don't know, 30 odd categories. If I don't know what this is, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing it for? Why are you working on something that you can't even put in a broad category?
Right.
Now, that might happen, and then the areas also have an area level zeros as well. So if you're really desperate and you just need somewhere to put it in an area, there is a mechanism for that. But now we're getting a bit, we're
Hmm.
getting a little bit disorganized. And then one step further, we actually don't use area 0309. We start at 10 through 19. Again,
Hmm.
this, reserve the zeros at the front. And area 0309 is your system management area, and it contains a system level inbox,
Right.
which is where you can put something that you really just have no idea where it goes. But I know that it at least refers to Johnny.Decimal being at work as opposed to John Noble, the human. So I can put it in a system. But the higher up you go, the less organized you get.
Right.
And I tend to,
Sorry, go ahead.
that's okay.
I was saying you had a concept of projects as well. So is this what you're talking about, like Johnny.Decimal versus Johnny Noble?
We renamed projects to the system. So you have a
Right.
system, which is me or my work, and then that used to be called project. And the reason we renamed that was because my view on this has shifted over the years that I've been doing this. I used to have an ID, so down at the bottom, the place, because here's another crucial rule, by the way. You may not, and this is a hard rule, you may not store anything at a category level, so
Hmm.
not in an ID,
Hmm.
or at the area level.
Right.
Everything must be in an ID, no exceptions there, because otherwise you've just got stuff kind of floating around.
Right.
And so I used to have quite specific IDs. I used to have, let's say, in technology, because I've still got some of my old ones, so I can review them. Um, Connection details for a specific machine, say SSH details to a specific server as an ID. That was the entire contents of the ID. Now that's really specific.
Hmm.
But in 2008, when we all didn't carry the cloud around all day, that was enough because we just didn't have that much stuff.
Yeah.
And as life moves on and as the volume of stuff we're all asked to manage every day increases digitally, because everything is digital these days, there's essentially nothing that isn't digital.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you do either. You can have an analog hobby, but eventually that thing's going to result in something digital because you've got a website, you're going to Instagram, whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, Patterns, PDFs, everything's digital. And so the way that I think about these things has kind of shifted up where an ID used to be quite a specific thing. And I now think IDs should be broader than that.
Hmm.
So in the life admin example, in the old days, this concert that I'm going to in January would have been its own ID.
Right.
The category would have been gigs and concerts,
Hmm.
and the ID would have been an event.
Right.
And now the category is fun, entertaining, and travel. And one of the IDs in there is music.
Hmm.
And then what I do is using again, think about templates and patterns. Don't just throw files in there. The PDF that I got for this gig 2 hours ago was named with today's date and timestamp.
Right.
Didn't even have the name of the band in it. Thank you, Ticketek. Didn't have the name of the band in it, and it was today's date timestamp. Now that's next to useless. So I renamed that with the date of the gig and the name of the band. So just rename things so that so now I've got one ID, 15.33 music, and it can have a whole bunch of stuff in there.
Right.
But it's all sorted. The date is the appropriate way to sort that sort of thing because, music events are anchored at a date and your brain thinks about them and remembers where they are spatially.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's and so back to the original question of why the name from a project, because I tend to think of, we colloquially use the word project to say like, I'm painting the garage. That's a weekend project. And that is the sort of thing that fits in an ID.
Right.
I didn't want people to think that painting the garage was something that required a whole Johnny.Decimal project, because you should really try and limit the number of Johnny.Decimal projects, now systems, that you have in your life. Most people should only have one for your home life and maybe one at work.
Okay.
Don't go crazy creating new projects, systems.
There's one more thing, right? So this is probably again from the GTD world. So it's something called para as well, and I'm trying to integrate all three for my life. But projects end, and areas don't. So systems don't, and that's a good way to sort of have that. I mean,
systems don't end. Yes, your system should be with you essentially for life.
Yeah. Okay. You really solved this problem for me when you talked about IDs and the example with a gig, because I was wondering if I go to a trip, and now that everybody, you don't need to buy film and Kodak for cameras, all the pictures. I have like 2,500 pictures in like a 20-day trip. Now I'm not gonna like give IDs to every picture over there, so that's okay, right? The whole folder is one ID.
The whole folder would be an ID, yes. And in fact, in the Life Admin system, we've even consolidated longer trips. So we've got two types of trips. You've got shorter trips. So I was in Sydney last week for Lucy's sister's birthday. So that's a quick trip. You book a bus, you go up, whatever, nice and easy. Nothing, a handful of documents that you need to manage.
Yeah.
That doesn't need its own ID. Yeah. Didn't plan any events, none of that sort of stuff. So with Life Admin, we put all short trips, 15.41, is a single ID. And again, the first thing you should see when you open that ID folder is a bunch of dates, year, month, date. So it obviously sorts chronologically in your file system. Yeah. Whereas for longer trips, I think a longer trip is still the sort of thing that will generate its own ID. So if you're going, you plan a trip to Peru and you got all sorts of stuff planned and you got your tickets and your visa and your insurance, and that's therefore in your photos. If you'd like to create an album with all of those photos, that would have the ID of the trip. Yeah.
Sometimes,
but even that with
now,
even with trips, we've created a template. Really, 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 just try and template your whole life. Each of our longer trips in Life Admin has a template, and so we use 6 numbered subfolders. I can't remember what they are, planning, and we've named them. Another thing an interesting thing with Life Admin was we realized we're kind of really boring with computers, us humans, and we just give things these really prosaic names as if the computer's scared of a little bit of a couple of words,
Yeah.
And so with Life Admin, we just called things what they were. It's like somewhere to stay, getting there and getting around, Help your brain talk to yourself. When you're using your computer, you're just talking to yourself. So don't try and squish things down to this one kind of the most boring word that represents the concept that you're talking about. Just call it what it is.
Yeah.
And so each of those trips has 6 folders with those sorts of things as templates as well.
I was just saying that for me, I once remember I spent an equivalent of about £150 on just copying for a visa application. So that itself would have been a system. It was for the UK when I visited again. So it was bad. But it helps if you have things in a certain, like, at least organized by year, if nothing else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you can get a long way with finding your way to the place. Like I said, music's the perfect example. And I won't need this gig ticket past January. It's nice to keep as an artifact and I can scroll through my past gigs. But if that folder is is absolutely always sorted by date. There are no exceptions in there.
Right.
And that's the thing when you decide on a template, this is what we're going to do for small business is define these templates. So within each of your IDs, you should almost always, I won't say always, but you should, because there's always exceptions, but you should almost always then have a structure for the things saved in there. And
Hmm.
it should be alphabetical if those things are some sort of entity. If it's a company or a person, they should be the alphabet. Remind me about the note about the alphabet, or date-based if it's a date-based thing, and most things I think fit into those two things. Here's the
Right.
other interesting thing about Johnny.Decimal, which was um, an interesting side effect, is that it takes away your reliance on the alphabet. And people
Hmm.
think, well, hang on, isn't the alphabet super useful? And the alphabet is super useful if you're writing a phone book. But if you're trying to find things in your files, the alphabet is actually surprisingly unuseful
Yeah.
because, like we said before, with ambiguity, budget, finance, money, right? You could call it any of those things and they're all equally valid. And so, did I call it budget or finance or money? And that moves things around in your file system. And then
Right.
someone else comes and creates a bunch of other folders that start with A. Someone starts an aardvark farm. And now all of your stuff moves. And so
Yeah.
your muscle memory and your spatial awareness breaks.
Yeah.
And I think that's why anyone who's listening to me now who's worked in a big organization, humans naturally put numbers in front of things.
Hmm.
I've seen it everywhere I work, and I'm a technologist, so perhaps it skews that way, but I don't think so. People naturally just put numbers in front of folders in large shared file systems
Right.
so that they know theirs is just 38. 38 is
Right.
just the next number. They just put 38, and 38 doesn't move now. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 38. And then whoever creates things after doesn't mess up where your thing is. And I think it's a strange thing that humans just kind of tend to do anyway.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question, but I need to set this up in a sort of like sociological way. Is this
Oh,
is this a problem of abundance then? Because at least in the digital space, it's built for scarcity. Now we need to
yeah,
figure out how to organize everything because we don't have unlimited bandwidth, and that's what's going on.
yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%. The computer has allowed us, the computer's encouraged us to just create.
Right.
There is no cost to right click new folder,
Yeah.
and there was a cost in the old days. I still have, we use them as an analogy. We have manila folders,
Hmm.
and a manila folder, is 50 cents or whatever it costs. So there's an actual cost.
Yeah.
But there's also a cost. I mean, imagine the worst accountant's office. I think we've all been to one where you go to that accountant and they're just a shambles,
Oh, yeah.
and there's stuff everywhere, and the desks are piled this high.
Yeah.
That is a visceral thing. When you are that disorganized in the real world,
Right.
you and everyone else can see it. But you can be that disorganized on your computer, and it's just this invisible kind of this curse that's there waiting for you that no one can do anything with, that we're all terrified of as well. And here's the other thought: none of us have ever been given any training,
Yeah.
right? This has all come about. I started work properly in the early 2000s, and back then, yeah, you had your computer, you had your G drive, but the volume of stuff we created on the computer was just less,
Yeah.
way less emails, way less documents, way less stuff. No such thing as Teams. People weren't just generating content on the fly. And so, in the 25 short years since then, which has gone by really fast, none of our behaviors have changed.
Yeah.
None of the people, and again, most people aren't people like us. Most people aren't technologists. Most people don't have a brain for numbers. And that's not a criticism. That's just a fact. That's just how, and we shouldn't expect them to. Why should we expect most people to just magically be able to do this?
Yeah.
And so we plunk them down in front of these systems and just give them no tools, no training, no guidance, and lo and behold, the results a mess. Well, hardly surprising,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's my longer term dream. I don't. We said before, I don't really want to be like an entrepreneur and Mark Zuckerberg, and I don't have the change the world gene. I'm not one of those guys. Change the world, but I kind of do in a way. I
Yeah.
kind of do because I kind of want to make it easier. I just want to make it easier for people to just know where they're stuck because people just want to go to work and do their job.
Yeah.
They just want to go to work, make the things they have to make, and then be able to find them again. And not, I mean, the frustration is palpable in offices these days. It is tangible because people can't find things. My friend Alex, the guy who named the system, he told me a story last year. He was in front of one of the big Microsoft Surface whiteboards, really cool things, digital markers, very cool sort of thing. On a Teams meeting, him and a bunch of guys in different places came up with all this, cool and interesting stuff. The meeting ended, and nobody could find it. There was an artifact somewhere, this thing that they'd created, that they'd spent 2 hours on a collaborative session generating,
Yeah.
and nobody had the first idea where it was anymore.
Right.
And I mean, that's terrible. Think about it. Think about the waste. It's shocking. So that's
Yeah.
my long-term view, is just to try and nudge us in the right direction there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy in a digital system just to, essentially have an unlimitedly big storage room and they just shut the door on it. Like there's this
Yeah.
scene in Friends where Monica is the hyper person who's always cleaning things up, but there is this one secret closet where everything's messed up. And that's most of
Yeah.
us now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, I guess, one with your systems and, just essentially building up that habit, that muscle, we are developing an etiquette, if you may, or perhaps a certain set of behaviors to be able to, let's say, deal with the abundance, because even that requires dealing with it. It's not just economizing. So
Mm.
because, economizing your time. Okay. Having said that, how is this going to be like I should have opened the course before and finished it before this interview, but I haven't. So, are the categories and the areas that you've made suggestions to, are they people just accept it what they are? What's the like? How is it? Is it consulting or is it a product? Like, how does that work?
Pretty much. So if we talk in the context of live admin or the upcoming small business pack,
Hmm.
I think, and again, this has been quite interesting because life admin's only a couple of months old, and we're just testing things as we go. I don't have some grand strategy. I'm just trying things out,
Yeah.
trying to listen to my audience and see what works. But it's been interesting watching people's reactions, and people find it to be a relief. I've told them that
Right.
in this life admin context, there are these 110 usable IDs, and we've split them up into headings. So they kind of grouped, and they're in these 5 categories. And it comes with a ready built index, so you can use search words and find things.
Yeah.
And I've told them to find the closest thing and just use it. Now,
Right.
we found a handful of exceptions. And I still myself, I find exceptions. Like the other day, we had a parcel stolen from the front porch, as is modern life. And I thought, I called the police and got a reference number.
Right.
I thought, having things stolen wasn't an ID that we generated. We
Yeah.
just we didn't think about it.
Yeah.
But what's it closest to? And it's closest to house insurance.
Right.
What's the point of me calling and getting a police reference number? It's so that I can claim something back in the future.
Yeah.
So house insurance, 12.12. It was the nearest, and it's good enough. And I wrote some notes in my index, and I put the words, and I'll find that again. So I actually find that I encourage people in this context to use the system. And if we all use the system, we've all got a shared language. And you can for sure people take the pack, you look at it and use it for inspiration, and then completely change it. And that's totally cool. I
Okay.
encourage it. Do whatever. If you want to do that, I'm never going to tell you not to.
Right.
But I think for a lot of people, the relief of not having to, the relief of just being told, this is where that thing goes. And then think about how powerful this might become. And we haven't launched it yet in the small business context. What I want to do is to give people worldwide a common language, like we said about Dewey and libraries earlier. If you go online now and try and find some advice about filing your taxes, something, let's try and think of something less boring, moving into a new office, co-working space. There's a wealth of information out there. I have no doubt. There's going to be all sorts of stuff, but we don't have a way to talk about it. It's like I was saying when I first started work on the dance production, and I wanted to give people a reference, 41.14, to the tickets.
Right.
Well, imagine if we all start talking this same sort of language based around this common system, and we all have this common reference. And when you jump into my forum or the Discord, you're not just in a big channel full of people just talking about business. You can ask a very targeted question about a targeted thing and get advice from people who are experts in those areas. And we can start providing, links and resources, to a specific thing because we're all talking the same language. So I think there's something powerful there that I'm just kind of scratching the surface of, that if people are ready to accept a system as it is
Hmm.
and just to use it and get on with it, because again, back to the beginning, back to first principles, I'll implore the viewer, we're talking about filing things, right? Do not spend any more time
Yeah.
than is necessary filing things. You've got far better things to do.
Yeah.
I'm the only one who should be spending time thinking about filing things because that happens to be my job.
Right.
That's not anybody else's job.
Right.
Your job is producing interesting content for people. Other people, we have in mind for a small business. You're a personal trainer. You're a masseuse. You're a single person accountant who works from home. All these small things that people do. You make earrings and you sell them at your local market, right? Stop thinking about filing things.
Yeah.
Just use this common system that we've developed for you that will help you to continue to understand, that will clarify and evolve as life moves on, as we realize we found exceptions. But get on board with a common thing because it's simpler. Do not invent this again.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably don't remember this, but a few years ago, this is before you were like full time in Johnny.Decimal. I came across your website, and again, I tend to get really anxious. So then after experimenting, I emailed you and for some suggestions, how do I do this? How do I categorize my life? And
Yeah.
you were like, I think you were like, you need to figure this out. But I'm assuming you got a lot of these questions. That's the reason why you came up with the system, right?
We
A step further.
yeah, we did, and that's why the first thing we did. It's funny, when I quit my job last year, it was last May. I didn't have the first idea what I was going to do,
Mm,
and I spent a couple of months. Shocking when I think back on it, looking at Microsoft Teams and trying to build some software for the enterprise.
right.
Well, that was a bad time. And then Lucy and I were going on holiday, and we thought, geez, we should really try and do something to sell before we went on holiday. And so we worked pretty much nonstop for about 3 weeks. Fortunately, Lucy is a copy editor in a
Right.
previous life, so her profession is words, which is amazingly helpful. And we spent about 3 months, and we realized what I was spending a lot of time answering was, although I've got this website, because I see the website as the manual.
Yeah.
It is the rules, right? And we're trying to keep it tight. I want it to be quite lean. It's the reference guide.
Mm,
And what I didn't have was a step-by-step process to take you on the journey of,
yeah.
how do I build this thing, and how do I think about areas and on categories and IDs, and how do I discover them, and how do I group them. And so we wrote the workbook, which is a PDF, 120-page PDF. And so it takes you on a step-by-step journey to developing your own system. And you do discovery and you put post-it notes everywhere. And then what we did after that, we used the workbook to organize Lucy's life. And
Right.
so we actually ran the process on Lucy, and that's the workshop, which is the 5 hours of video, which is and I hope I don't sound like I'm just trying to sell all my things, but this
Oh,
is
no,
my
please
job.
do. I love your
This
things.
is this is what I do, and please buy things because we need the money. But I think it's really good. I
Yeah.
think the workshop is really good because what we did there was we made an effort, although she sits there,
Mm,
we made an effort not to discuss too much of the stuff off camera.
right.
So Lucy was truly a student. And when we turned the camera on, we I was getting genuine questions for the first time. And a lot of it is me standing in front of the whiteboard there. It's
Right.
not just the two of us in a corner moving a mouse on a screen. It's us actually having these conversations, because I think that's the really interesting part, is it's kind of conceptualizing this in your mind and thinking about, again, for the thing that is unique to you for your particular hobby that I can't design for you because I
Yeah.
don't I don't know anything about it. But it's how to think about these things, or if you're at work, how to divvy these things up. And so that's what the workbook and the workshop is. And so what I recommend for most people now, if you're into it, if it's a thing you really want to get involved with, I think most people should use life admin to do their life admin,
Mm,
because why do that again, right? Don't do that again. But then that's one single area. So in your system, which is your life admin is area 10 through 19, life admin. It's only 5 categories. And we worked hard to make it as small as it could be, actually. And then The remaining areas, 20, 29, 30, 39, are for your hobbies and interests and so on, you know. But I used to be a marriage celebrant. So
Hmm.
one of my areas was being a marriage celebrant, for example. And that's what those other resources are for you to design your own thing or to
Right.
design your work system.
Okay. How many systems though? You're saying two maximum. Are you
I
putting it?
would, it depends. Here I've got my own personal system. Lucy has her own personal system. I've got I've got two, and again, I think I'm a bit unique here because the Johnny.Decimal website, if you look at the side navigation bar,
Hmm.
is a Johnny.Decimal system. It's the most
Right.
meta thing in the world. So that is a system just for the website.
Yeah.
And then the Johnny.Decimal business is another system.
Right.
And that's where we deal with, you know, having a business and doing company taxes and developing products and having customers and doing marketing and all that sort of stuff. But I think for the majority of people, you can get away with one at home. And even if you are a small producer of small things, you like small business, for example, that's a good example. Small business is likely to come as two areas.
Hmm.
It's a two-area system. The first one is company administration, which we're trying to line up with life admin,
Right.
because me and being a human is the company and its registration. That's the same thing.
Hmm.
Me living somewhere and getting around is the same as a company. You have an office and you have a car or a food truck or whatever.
Yeah.
My money, company money, same thing. Technology, that matches. And that's about as far as we've got so far. So I think company admin is one thing. And then the product you design, which is another one of these where we can't do that for you because we don't know what you do, but we can give you guidance and templates and kind of, I'd like to over time build some structures for product, even if they are, one of them might be you design a physical thing that you sell in a shop.
Right.
That might be enough of a template to at least get you moving. Or you might provide some purely remote mental service.
Right. Right.
And that might be another type of thing. But I think even that, I think most small businesses, let's say up to a couple of employees, can fit in two areas
Hmm. Okay.
mostly.
Okay.
So compress. Don't, if this thing's all about minimizing choice, because the less choice you have, the less opportunities you have to go wrong,
Right.
the less ambiguity there is about where a thing can be. And so, yeah, somebody wrote to me the other day and said, is life admin only 5 categories? And I said, we worked damn hard to make it only 5 categories. You know,
Right.
it would have been easier to make it more. But when it's the compression, it's the thought, can this really different to that? And that's, I think there's a hidden power there.
But the discovery process in the workshop, that is going to be important for everybody to go through.
That's the most crucial thing. If you're doing your own thing,
Right.
in a nutshell, the process, it's not a complicated process.
Right.
And there's a short version on the website. Firstly, define your scope. Is project management 101. You know,
Hmm.
what is the thing you're organizing? Put a box around it. Make sure that you're very clear.
Hmm.
This is the thing I am organizing, and this is not.
Yeah.
So in the Johnny.Decimal context, say the business, I'm not including my personal life. That's
Hmm.
out of scope. Different system.
Yeah.
And then you do discovery, which is just, and I basically recommend writing everything down you can do. Oh, I threw it away. I've got these tiny pieces of Japanese origami paper, and I spent a couple of weeks. It's actually a really interesting exercise. Everything you do,
Yeah.
everything you do, every tiny action. Go and get water. Absurd, okay, but you only need to write it down once. But then, when you write down everything you do,
Yeah.
it's kind of fascinating how many things there are in a
Yeah.
day. And that's another thing that we could talk about for a while is attention, and how I think this sort of system can try and give us some focus and attention back, but that's a slightly different issue. Um, and then, yeah, so the discovery is just write down as many things as you can possibly find, and then you basically, it's an old established, it's called a card sort. You can find that on Wikipedia.
Okay.
And you basically just group things. You know, you group them either by a very broad thing first, and then you divide those things up. So that's kind of naturally creating your areas and then categories.
Hmm.
And then I encourage you to do it again the other way around, to put everything up and divide it into smaller groups, and then to group those things into your creating categories and then putting those into areas. Just to do that a number of different ways, because I think people go into this sort of thing with preconceptions.
Hmm.
Lucy's system was really interesting that she came up with. She came up with this thing called the Imaginarium, which was just where, she's got years and years of interesting projects and those strange things. And she's that sort of person. She writes things down. She's creative.
Yeah.
And so that she ended up with an area called the Imaginarium. And that's what came out of her system. So yeah, if everyone's going to be different there. And it's just a matter of, that's why I say it takes about a month as well. You need to spend about a week really defining your focus. Go for walks, go for, I say this, you'll hear me in the workshop a couple of times, and I really mean it. Don't sit at the computer and just kind of try and,
Yeah.
just go for a wander, take a notebook, and just let this thing evolve, let this thing come out.
So I'll have to ask, just to make it more concrete, I'm going to ask you like a personal question. I have this podcast, which, ebbs and flows when it comes to the number of episodes I'm recording every week, right?
Yep.
There is the coaching service. I help my wife with her business. And then I've got my spiritual interests, I've got my academic interests. And I don't know, I also like to sometimes bid for certain short-term projects in project management. Now, for
Mhm.
me, would you say, should I only make one system or should I, how's that, how should that be?
That's definitely one system. Yeah. So
Okay.
is this you considering yourself as a business there?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
your job and career. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that feels like, the podcast feels like an area.
Right.
And think about, they call it areas for a reason. It's an area of your life.
Right.
So having a podcast is an area of your life that is really distinct from your other business and, what the things you do at home and the stuff your wife does. So
Right.
that is an area. And then within there, you could easily think of a couple of categories. You might have, your equipment and all the rest of it. You've got episodes and recording and publishing and maybe some marketing, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And then coaching feels distinct as well.
Yeah.
Coaching feels like an area of your life.
Right.
And I would say that probably feels like its own thing as well. But once you do this discovery, again, that's what I said to Lucy in the workshop is, once you've looked at these things, just really think, okay, can these two things can we bolt those together?
Yeah.
Can we just try and make them one thing? But for sure, when you think about, there are 9 usable areas in a system, 10 through 19 up to 90 through 99. I've never used anywhere near that many. I
Mm.
used to do this for a 3-year long, 3-year long Australia-wide data center deployment project. A couple of $100 million worth of budget, and I ran that for 3 years in 7 or 8 areas. So you'd be amazed how much you can get in one of these things, for
So
sure.
at
There's
what
more room
point?
than you think.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And also this limitation is actually liberating. You're right.
Yeah.
This is weird. But at what point does, let's say, the coaching service graduate to another system of its own rather than just being an area in my personal system? Or does that have to happen?
I don't think it has to happen if you've got room. No, because the problem with extra systems.
Hmm.
So the natural Johnny.Decimal number is 01.23.
Yeah.
It's 2 digits, a decimal, 2 digits. As soon as you introduce another system, you now have, let's just use 1111. 11.11 is an ID that can now exist in 2 systems.
Right.
So you can no longer unambiguously refer to 1111. Now you need to put something on the front.
Yeah.
What we use is a system identifier, which is letter, number. So the Johnny.Decimal system is D85, for example, D for decimal. 85 is not important. So all of a sudden, every one of my IDs starts with D85.11.11. And so if you can avoid that, you absolutely should. Now, if you are at home, this doesn't apply to me because I'm here and I only have one laptop. But when I went to work and did that data center deployment, it was a different system to my own personal home stuff, but I didn't really need to consider it as one because the worlds were I call these domains. This is the final
Domains.
kind of conceptual concept.
Hmm.
Your home is a domain. If
Right.
it does not interact with in any way, and I worked for a government department, so I wasn't taking my own computer or phone to work. Work was behind a wall, work email, work file systems, work so on.
Right.
So I didn't need to consider that as a separate system, even though it actually was.
Yeah.
But as soon as it's about complexity. As soon as you have another system, I wish I didn't have multiple systems here at home. It's a pain to have multiple. If I could probably, honestly, I could probably consolidate mine.
But you've got
I could.
partners. So that might help if it has a separate system.
That's a good point. That's another interesting issue is if you want to share it. Yeah, because our business system is shared with Lucy. So yes, that's
Right.
another interesting consideration.
Yeah. So I'm imagining like a Venn diagram of these two circles, right? So if they're really far apart, that's great. That deserves a separate system, separate domain. But the moment it starts
Yep.
coming together, then we
That's
have
right. As soon as you have shared tools that might interact with each other, and therefore now you've got ambiguity, that's when you need to start. That's when you need to use the extra notation.
okay. A couple of like final questions because it's been super helpful. Um,
Yep.
I have a filing system, like a literal filing cabinet with like 100, unused Manila folders. Some of them are
Yep.
used. Then I've got the hard drive because I'm always scared that if Google or whatever cloud I'm planning to use just somehow goes out of business, my data is gone, so I back up
Hmm.
everything. And then of course the cloud and then the personal. Like how many times do I need to create and for my notes and for my email and for my mail? How many times do I need to create the system and replicate it? Both in the digital and
One.
analog world. Okay. All right.
One. Because think of you are falling, and this is I still do it myself. The mindset we have to get out of is that your file system is not your system. Your index is your system.
Right.
So you only
Right.
have one index, pick a notes app and use it. I prefer Bear personally. A lot of people like Obsidian, use whatever you want. Your index is your system. The
Right.
only place a number must exist, and in fact, many IDs may only exist in your index because you might only have a note. You might not have a file. You might not have an email.
Mm,
And so you create an entry in your index for everything.
mm,
And here's another one of the advantages of this thing is that these days, there are so many places the thing can be. It can be on those hard drives. It can be on the cloud. It can be in those manila folders. It can be in your email. It can be in your local file system. It can be in your iCloud drive. It can be anywhere. And so the index serves, and what I do, I just put at the top, I write location colon, and I just write where that thing is. So if
okay.
you've only got a thing that's in a manila folder, the artifact is an ID entry,
Right.
and it says location colon manila folder in the cupboard, or location colon hard drive in the garage, or location colon iCloud drive, or so on.
Right.
So yeah,
This is
one
helpful.
place you don't need and shouldn't, and I think it helps you behaviorally if you do not recreate the entire folder structure tree
Yeah.
everywhere, because some of those would be blank, and I think that perpetuates this mindset that we have to try and break, which is that your file system is the center of your universe. It used to be, for sure, it used to be. But the more we go to the cloud and the more we go, and when I say the cloud, I mean even things like apps,
Yeah.
Lucy uses Canva as online website design. So
Yeah.
she's got files that are just in Canva. How would you know where they were previously?
Right.
And the answer now is you make yourself a note in your index and you tell yourself, got files in Canva. And you might have files in multiple, for a design artifact, it might be in Canva and it might be on the local hard drive or, whatever.
So your system is the control center, essentially, the note, which can just tell you that, the actual thing is kept somewhere else, and that's all you need.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Right. That's wow. Okay. Thank
The,
you.
the, the, note, the note in your index is the entry in your system. It
Right.
is the canonical entry. And then an artifact might exist elsewhere,
Right.
most frequently in your file system,
Hmm.
but the index entry is the ID.
Okay. Okay. I got a
And
two-part question.
therefore,
Sorry.
yeah. So last piece of advice there, really, really try, and I still fall down on this because it's such an old habit. Really try and start working in your index. Don't start work in your file system. We do that. We just sit down at the computer and we click the finder and we're in our file system. Don't
Yeah.
start there. Start in your index.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that I will do that. Thank you. And I'm going to finish that
Good.
course as well. Okay, two-part question. What are your thoughts? Okay, where not your thoughts, but where are you vis-a-vis Marie Kondo and actually deleting things, right?
Yep.
What do you
Funny
think?
enough, just yesterday we threw away 25 kilos of clothes.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
we did. Yeah, I came in to find Lucy organizing the cupboard, and I said, "Right, I want some of that." So yeah, it's either being donated to the Red Cross or it's gone to recycling. I'm not a digital hoarder.
Okay.
I'm absolutely not. That said, I don't. It's a common question on my forum: is what do I do with the old stuff, and how do I archive it? And I think this has changed a little in my older thinking, where I was talking about having more granular IDs.
Hmm.
and this will definitely still be the case in some people's systems. No, I'm not saying don't do this, but you tend to things get created and then you have new IDs. So let's say you're in category 15, the first thing you create 15, 11, 15, 12, 15, 13. And then, time moves on and now you're up at 15.35, 36. At which point you just naturally find that the stuff down at 11, 12, 13 probably just isn't relevant anymore.
Right.
And so people naturally want to do something with it. They want to
Mm.
archive it and they want to, like, can I reuse the number? And I say, no, just leave it there. Don't
Yeah.
do anything with it. I tend to find the more I go to recommending this much broader IDs, I used to recommend context here is important. I used to say, and it was a thing on my website, do not create subfolders in an
Yeah.
ID. I used to be strictly area, category, ID, and you're done. I've changed my thinking there
Thank
to
you.
but as long as those subfolders are controlled, as long as they're not just the chaos that we're escaping from, that would be
Yeah.
pointless, obviously. So ideally by date is, I think, the most natural pattern there. But then we've got a subfolder of, concert tickets. And I mean, that can go on for life,
Yeah.
there's nothing, I can just sort that by date and all the old stuff's just going to go off the top and I'm not going to care about it. So as a rule, I don't hoard stuff, but nor do I necessarily say to archive aggressively. Just things just age out,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is an advantage of the numbers of the system. Just
Yeah.
happens.
I could just do a yearly review, and I'd like doing that. So that's the time I can start archiving things if I want to.
Yep. If you want to, yeah.
Yeah. A distinction between tracks and tags. Now, this is from a SaaS-based company I used to work in for a while, and they had this in their product, and I've kind of used it everywhere. So the categories and the folders are essentially like you don't want to have one artifact in multiple folders, right? But tags is something that can be pulled in multiple folders. So what's your thinking around that?
Yeah, I personally have just never got on with tags. I understand why people find them useful. I think
Hmm.
my problem with tags is that now you just have to organize your tags.
Yeah.
You've just moved the thing you're organizing off to tags, and all of a sudden, I've done it myself. The number of times I've tried to organize my music library, and you go into the genres and you assign tags to things. Well, now I just have, what was it, electronic, electronica? There's so many overlapping things they could be. So actually, there's a blog post of mine you can find about. I think you might potentially be able to organize your tags as a Johnny.Decimal system. That might work, but
Yeah.
I tend not to use tags in the situation where, because there is definitely a situation where you want a copy of a thing in multiple places.
Hmm.
That's definitely a thing, and I do understand that. There are examples where that is definitely useful. I tend to find those cases are ones where, think about the type of document that probably is. It's probably not something that you are continually updating.
Right.
It's not your budget spreadsheet. Now, if you have two copies of your budget spreadsheet, that's catastrophic because you update one and your wife updates the other, or you update one and the next week you update the other one, right? That's a terrible idea. Do not do that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the budget spreadsheet is the sort of thing that people naturally want in two places. But that sort of document tends to be a fixed thing.
Hmm.
It's a certificate or a receipt or it's a something that tends to be a PDF that you do not edit. So I think, and this is something else that we're going to put into small business, is this: think of the type of file that it is. And if it is the type of file that will not be updated, and if somebody did a photograph is one, I had a guy mail me and he runs pizza restaurants in Ohio. And he was asking about photographs of things that he used on things like merch and menus. And again, I said, I think it's okay to have a photograph of a meal in both the menu folder and the pizza folder and the local school fete folder.
Right.
Because A, you're probably not going to modify that photograph. And B, if you do, if you tweak it or crop it or something, or just, change the color, that doesn't matter. You've no longer created a catastrophic failure
Right.
compared to having two copies of your budget spreadsheet. So
Right.
that's a fairly new idea that I need to think about and get some, write some things down on. But I think there are definitely two types of documents, and it's okay to have multiple copies of some of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And not worry about the versions and all of that. Like it's going to be the
You're not
latest
going to
version
update
anyway.
them.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. No, there
Right.
is only a version. I only have one birth certificate.
Yeah. How do you distinguish between shallow storage and deep storage, or is it just the same thing?
In what context?
In the
I don't
context
think
of
so.
usability, in the sense that I might not require my, let's say, school diploma every day. I don't want to look at it, but my license, I would.
Doesn't matter. Everything's at the same level in a Johnny
Okay.
Decimal system. Yep.
Okay.
Everything sits at that idea level. Yeah. Which
Uh,
makes that's another thing that makes it easy. It's predictable, you know.
yeah.
I know area category ID it's there, or
Right.
possibly dated subfolder, but yeah, no,
Right.
always the same.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it's not a to-do list. It's a list to store things anyway. So you can have a separate kind of system for to-do list integrated somehow, and that might kind of work.
Yes, and that's something else that I'm trying to think about is managing to. That's a fascinating thing that we could get into for a long, long time. Is managing to dos. I haven't solved that yet personally.
Hmm.
I use Things, which is just a lovely Mac app. I use it mostly because it's delightful,
Yeah.
and I'm still trying to figure out. This thing does naturally, and I think I've landed on quite a happy little place about. I think what one thing about to dos is reasonably simple, which is the categorization of them. If I think about, no, I won't check one. Come up with a pricing strategy for my upcoming small business pack. That is a to do
Right.
that clearly relates to the category where the small business pack is being developed.
Hmm.
So in my to do system, I have folders which broadly mirror the areas and categories of my system. And then
Right.
those to dos can go in there. Because I think it, and I'm still trying to make this a habit, but I think if you worked in categories, as opposed to looking at a list of to dos and you've got things from all over the place potentially,
Right.
if you worked in a category of stuff, you're putting yourself in the mindset. Here I am sitting down to do this category of things. And if I did all of those tasks together, I think that would probably be more effective.
Right.
So that's one thing, and I think that's a reasonably simple way to organize your stuff. I think there's still a problem for me of um, urgency and priority, which
Hmm.
I still think is a difficult thing. It's interesting. I watched Jason Atwood the other week was talking to you about GTD.
Hmm.
I I was a GTDer as well back in the day, and I still find many of the concepts definitely very interesting. It's definitely still useful, but I think it also has some keeping up to do
Yeah. Yeah.
because the number of things that we all had to do back in 2007 or whatever it was just a lot less, I think.
Yeah.
And the volume of stuff that I don't think we necessarily have more to do. I
Yeah.
think we just track it more. You know, Lucy tracks watering the plants now because
Yeah.
she has a to-do system. But in that sense, that's a trivial example, but multiply that by 100.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you open your to-do system and you're like, whoa, man, like that's a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
But you still want to remember to water the plants. So I think there's something interesting there as well to explore.
Yeah, it is interesting because I mean I've so I moved to the US last year, and then I had to inculcate some new habits with the new house I'm in, and like filling the ice machine or something like that. So I
Yeah.
so I made this like a daily task till it was part of my circuitry, and then I relieved it.
Yep.
So that's what I do
Yep.
with habits, and then the context lists are still very useful. But my reviews, I don't have a daily review. I have like 3 times a week review because daily review is too much for me. So
Yeah.
that's how I tweak
Yeah.
it.
A daily reviews a lot. And habits are very important. Yeah, fully agree on that. And here's a thing I've been trying, and this sounds so simple as to be almost inane, but it's been working reasonably well, is I think there are different types of tasks. And that's why I actually don't call them to-dos. The sort of to-dos that most people call a to-do isn't really a to-do.
Hmm.
It's a kind of goal or a dream or an idea or a thing, right? We write so many things down. And if you were to look at many, many of them,
Hmm.
if you never did them, nothing would happen.
Yeah.
And so there's a natural split there. But there's also a natural split in tasks in service of a project, me figuring out things for my website and packages and looking after my customers and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
They are things that I think naturally kind of happen through the day because here I
Yeah.
am sitting down at work, right? What else am I going to do? I'm doing those things in the service of my work.
Yeah.
I think the sort of thing that tends to build up and get ignored because we always see it as like it's over there and it's niggling. It's all those other it's watering the plants in a
Hmm.
way. Although Lucy loves watering the plants, but it's still a little thing you have to find 15 minutes in your day to do.
Yeah.
And so what I've been trying to find the time to do is, and I do it at the end of the day, I put it in the calendar. I've been finding hyper scheduling quite interesting recently, like
Hmm.
planning the whole day.
Yeah.
And then as move things around, adapt, right? The life has to be flexible, but move things around. And then I use Fantastical on the Mac, so you can have multiple calendars and you can color them. So my to-do calendar is pink, and then the done calendar is gray. And so I can kind of flick things between calendars and I can see my day progressing.
Yeah.
And at the end of a day, I'm trying to spend half an hour on the to-dos, but not the big important ones.
Yeah.
That's what I did all day.
Yeah.
Just on the little stuff that tends to get forgotten and undone. That doesn't feel important. But if you do keep on top of that, I just find just a bit less stressful, you know.
Yeah.
Life's just a bit better.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's just still work in progress.
definitely a work in progress. Yeah. I'll let you know how I get on.
Yeah. Well, we've got the last 10 minutes, so I want to make sure that I can get some more juice out of this because I'm loving it. Um, Complex projects like launching a rocket or, I don't know, starting up
Yeah.
some kind of a colony on Mars is, I'm assuming the system could be applied to those complex organizations and projects as well.
I assume people who manage those things must have some
Yeah.
similar system because I don't know how else you could do it. Honestly,
Right. Right.
I'm not sure how it would be possible. I mean, good project managers obviously have systems. When you think of a work breakdown structure
Yeah.
in project management, that is a natural hierarchy that, if done properly, is essentially what we're talking about here with areas and categories. Kind of.
Right.
Like I say, I use this on my aspect of the old data center deployment project, and without being able to link together using an ID to an event in my email,
Mm.
which we were working for a customer, so we had deliverables to customers and all of the usual stuff that comes along with a 3-year project, and lots of stuff there that needed to be recalled later, and being able to tie things into a project schedule. And of course, I used the same ID for all these things. So our project schedule had an ID in it. The budget had an ID in it. All of the resourcing had an ID in it. My email had an ID in it. And having that shared system to run that's the reason I was employed, was specifically to run Johnny.Decimal on that project. We finished on time and on budget, and I don't know how we could have without it.
Without it. Right.
So I
Yeah.
presume people who launch rockets have something going on.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what it is. Give
Yeah.
me a call,
Yeah.
because I am. I mean, I'm fascinated. That's the other thing with Johnny.Decimal. I'm not trying to monopolize anything. People love power. Cool, use
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
There are any number of other things that, whatever helps you be organized, use it.
Right.
And if you want to use a bit of power and a bit of Johnny.Decimal, whatever, I don't care,
Yeah.
as long as it helps. And so, like, honestly, if anyone out there is doing something else and similar, launching rockets, I'd love to know what it is.
My initial idea was to put the Johnny.Decimal system within the A of para, and then the P and A and R, whatever the first three ones are only for
Yep.
the, because I was distinguishing between shallow storage and deep storage. So, but
Yeah.
that could be.
And I think that is one of the things that people do enjoy about Para, in
Hmm.
that the P, right? The P's your currently active projects.
Projects.
All
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, you could you could replicate the idea with Johnny.Decimal. You could create, an alias or a
Yeah.
short link or whatever your operating system supports. So you could do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Your index naturally tends to help because in most notes apps, most recently edited trickles to the top.
Yeah.
Usually you don't need to be sorted by, it can be helpful to see the structure of your system, but you shouldn't be sorted by the title, which will just sort your whole system by number.
Right.
You should be sorting by modification date, and therefore the things you were doing recently are there anyway,
Right.
at the top of your index, because you've most recently been in there, tinkering in that note.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. All right. So last question. And
Yep.
I love the concept and the whole, let's say the goal of a lifestyle business. So what's next for you? What's next for Johnny.Decimal in the let's say next year?
Yeah, so small business is and I've got some really big plans for small business. I think seeing how people responded to the Life Admin Pack, seeing the need for, and I've already got my, my super fans, many of whom run a small business, telling me that this is a thing that they want. It needs to be a subscription thing
Hmm.
for my business to be sustainable. And I
Yeah.
know everybody just let out the collective groan. I understand. But the fact is, this is my job, and I can't sell $15 packs to people and continue to do this for the rest of my life. And I need to be able to do that. So,
Right.
what I'm going to do, however, I think that's interesting because that puts the onus squarely on me to deliver valuable content.
Hmm.
Why would you keep subscribing to something? Because the
Right.
thing about my pack that I give you, and that once you've got it on your computer, when I say subscription, I mean to the concept and to ongoing knowledge. I'm never going to take your thing away.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to do that. You've got it. Its folders in your file system. I couldn't if I wanted to.
Hmm.
So it's on us to evolve the content and to provide, to continue to be useful. And I think we can do that through, I spoke before about having the community of, imagine once you've got, excuse me, imagine once you've got 1,000 people in there helping each other with this shared language, and the person who's confused about their accounts can ask an accountant, and that accountant can ask the same person who happens to be a marketing expert, and we can all, we can all help each other. The other thing I want to do with the pack is to build operations manuals into it. So it's not just a place to store your files.
Right.
It's a place to, here's an easy example, your backups. Backups is going to be one of the IDs. World Backup Day is the 31st of March, I think. So how do you do backups? I understand fundamentally how one is meant to back up one's computer, but a lot of people haven't got the first idea.
Yeah.
And so we can give you, by way of the pack, by way of the ID, simple tools and guidance, recommended products, maybe, again, a place to discuss, a place to ask for help, an operations manual, so that every quarter, when I can try and keep you on track, I can say, all right, it's the end of the quarter or it's the end of the year. It's World Backup Day.
Yeah.
Everybody, it's time to test your backups. And so that sort of thing, I really want I would like small business to become your operations.
Right.
Because you, as the small business making candles that you sell at your local farmer's market on a Sunday, you don't have time for that. And I'd like that to be. So that's next for us. So that's probably going to consume a good part of the next year of our lives, I think. And we'll see where we go from there.
All the best.
That's what I want to do. I just want to make this thing into a sustainable business that, keeps us alive and keeps me engaged. I always want to be engaged with my audience. That's the part I love, is just answering questions and helping people and realizing, it's very rewarding. It's a rewarding job knowing that helps people.
I am on your list, so I'm assuming that when you launch it, it's going to be there.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. And how do people get in touch with you?
You'll know about it. Hello at Johnny.Decimal.com. I answer every email. Hello at Johnny.Decimal.com. I've got an email list which we just moved to. We call it the quarterly. As an idea, I saw somebody else's list and they said, I send 6 emails a year. And I thought, that is brilliant. What's less than 6? 4. So I send 4 emails a year. I hate email marketing. I despise it. I'll never spam you. So 4 emails a year. Jump on the list. There's a thing on the website. The small business list, that's another idea I stole from Craig Modd, who's an American who lives in Japan, who has these thing called pop-up lists.
Right.
And you jump on a list and he goes on a walk around Japan, and then he sends you an email every day. And at the end of that walk, the list's dead and your address is gone. So the small business list is a separate list, which is a pop-up and that's right on the homepage. You can't miss that. So yeah, that's what that one is. And I'm fairly easy to, I've got a forum, I've got a Discord. I'm dead easy to contact. I'm here and ready to help.
Awesome. Johnny, has been great. Thank you very much. Just hang around for 2 more minutes after the recording stops. And thank you, folks.
Thank you, man. Everyone. I really appreciate your time. Thanks, man.
Awesome.